As I mentioned in the previous video, we're going to continue to explore the political ramifications and reactions to Charlie Kirk's brutal assassination. And the thing that I want to begin with is, despite what you may hear from some right-wingers on social media, the Democratic Party, in terms of the people in power and with power, have, with near unanimity, publicly condemned the assassination of Charlie Kirk and political violence against him. And I want to show that by bringing at least some of the receipts to prove it. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. How political parties and people in power react is incredibly important, okay? In mass movements, it is impossible to police them perfectly. In other words, you will have some genuinely crazy people, some genuinely unhinged people, some genuinely unsavory people in a mass movement which comprises tens of millions of people, which is what both political parties are. There are tens of millions of Democrats, tens of millions of Republicans. You can't perfectly police them. What matters most is what is in the hearts and minds and what leaves the mouth of the leaders, the people with the most power, most influence, and therefore who should be held to the greatest level of accountability. As Mediaite notes, Democrats rally behind MAGA star Charlie Kirk after shooting, quote, "Political violence is never acceptable." And this article has not been updated. The list of reactions from Democrats for empathy and condemnation of political violence has only gotten bigger. Most Democrats are far from the biggest fans of MAGA star Charlie Kirk, but many were quick to take to social media on Wednesday to offer prayers for Kirk and condemn the Utah shooting. Okay? Quote, "The attack on Charlie Kirk is disgusting, vile, and reprehensible," said California Governor Gavin Newsom. Kirk was a recent guest on Newsom's podcast. Other lawmakers, like Representative Hakeem Jeffries, also condemned the act of violence. Hakeem Jeffries, who is one of the highest-ranking Democrats in the federal government. He is the minority leader in the House of Representatives. So again, we don't really have a unified leader at this point. President Biden was the last political leader, I guess Vice President Harris as well, because she was the last nominee. And they're both out of power. And so the highest-ranking Democrats have condemned this. Political violence is never the answer. My thoughts and prayers are with Charlie Kirk and his family. That was Hakeem Jeffries. Gun control advocate David Hogg and others also showed support for Kirk. Quote, "Horrifying news that Charlie Kirk has been shot. Gun violence and political violence have to fucking stop. Charlie, his family, and all the students who had to witness the shooting are in my thoughts. We have disagreements, but we all agree something has to change." So David Hogg is a prominent left-wing activist. He's not an elected official, but that's why I said people in power and with power, right? So people who are in elected office, who wield power, and also prominent unelected figures like David Hogg condemned this. Sherrod Brown, former senator who is actually, I think, running for Senate again in Ohio. He says the attack on Charlie Kirk is horrifying. Gun violence has no place in our democracy. Connie and I pray for his recovery. Former Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg says, "Horrific to hear that Charlie Kirk was shot today in Utah. Political violence must be always and totally rejected. Praying for him and all who may have been injured or impacted." Of course, I should mention, if it's not already clear, this article was published before it was confirmed Kirk had died, had succumbed to his gunshot. Zoran Mandani, the progressive, many say communist, Marxist, far left mayoral candidate in New York City, he condemned this, not just on a post, but also on video. "I'm horrified by the shooting of Charlie Kirk at a college event in Utah. Political violence has no place in our country." Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, okay? Crockett's one of my favorites. She is a firebrand. She is sassy. She can throw elbows, rhetorically speaking, with the Republicans, and she has no problem slinging mud if it's slung at her. This is what she said. "Today's act of political violence in Utah against Charlie Kirk is absolutely disgusting and unacceptable. We don't have to agree on everything, but we all should agree on this. Political violence is wrong and has no place in our democracy." Senator Ron Wyden, "Political violence has no place in our country. My thoughts are with Charlie Kirk and his family." John Ossoff, Democratic Senator of Georgia, he says, "I am shocked and horrified by the news that Charlie Kirk was shot in Utah and pray for his recovery, as well as the community at Utah Valley University. Political violence is unacceptable." So that was the article initially posted. And again, it's not been updated. I'll point out some other things as well. Salad Shooter, just a random Twitter account, but this has gone viral, 203,000 likes. He says, "I would like it to be noted that every Democrat on Twitter, from Gavin Newsom to John Favreau of Pod Save America to fucking Brooklyn Dad Defiant is condemning the shooting of Charlie Kirk, but not a single Republican has condemned the assassination of Melissa Hortman. I think that's a bit of an exaggeration, that last part. Some Republicans did, but the point that he was making is, hey, listen, Charlie Kirk is being met with grace and empathy and well wishes. And of course, after his death was confirmed, condolences to his family, and the political violence was universally condemned. Yashar Ali points out Matthew Dowd had been fired by MSNBC after his comments about the assassination of Charlie Kirk today. This is relevant. I want to play this clip, and I want you to see the reaction to it, okay? Because again, it goes to show how serious liberals, progressives, and Democrats are taking the response to Charlie Kirk's assassination.
We need the full details of this. We don't know if this was a supporter shooting their gun off in celebration, or so we have no idea about this. But following up on what was just said, he's been one of the most divisive, especially divisive younger figures in this, who is constantly sort of pushing this sort of hate speech or sort of aimed at certain groups. And I always go back to hateful thoughts lead to hateful words, which then lead to hateful actions. And I think that's the environment we're in, that people just, you can't stop with these sort of awful thoughts you have and then saying these awful words and not expect awful actions to take place.
Matt.
And that's the unfortunate environment we're in.
So that was Matthew Dowd, okay? And listen, some would say that is a perfectly reasonable sentiment to have. And I think probably at a later point, we can talk about, what are the implications of rhetoric? Because listen, words matter. My words matter. The words of the President of the United States matter. Conservative commentators' words matter. I think it is perfectly reasonable at some point to be like, okay, to what extent have we all control? I mean, I think about it. Man, I get worked up. I get pretty passionate. So I go out of my way to try to be very clear that political violence is unacceptable. But this person's asking, kind of a callous but reasonable question about rhetoric. Here's how seriously liberals, progressives, and Democrats took this. Mere hours after this, that man was fired. Statement from MSNBC President Rebecca Cutler. During our breaking news coverage of the shooting of Charlie Kirk, Matthew Dowd made comments that were inappropriate, insensitive, and unacceptable. We apologize for his statements, as has he. There is no place for violence in America, political or otherwise. And if I have that thing from Yashar Ali, then after that apology was issued, Matthew Dowd was fired from MSNBC. That's how serious the left is taking this in terms of trying to show compassion and grace and express condolences as a matter of damn near unanimity. Okay? Gavin Newsom, who was somebody who had a special relationship with Kirk as a Democratic foil, I can't remember if Kirk was his very first guest on Newsom's podcast, but they sparred in person. They sparred on social media. And the Governor Newsom's press office account has gone fairly hard at Charlie Kirk in recent weeks. I mean, obviously not since this happened, but the point is, they had a, political frenemy dynamic. They were intense rivals. This is what he said. We should all feel a deep sense of grief and outrage at the terrible violence that took place in Utah today. Charlie Kirk's murder is sick and reprehensible, and our thoughts are with his family, children, and loved ones. I knew Charlie, and I admired his passion and commitment to debate. His senseless murder is a reminder of how important it is for all of us across the political spectrum to foster genuine discourse on issues that deeply affect us all without resorting to political violence. The best way to honor Charlie's memory is to continue his work, engage with each other across ideology through spirited discourse. In a democracy, ideas are tested through words and good faith debate, never through violence. Honest disagreement is what makes us stronger. Violence only drives us further apart and corrodes the values at the heart of this nation. So some would say, and I think it's reasonable, that was a bit sanitized in terms of Charlie Kirk's actual representation. But the point is this. Even if you think that, the fact that Gavin Newsom is being so generous and charitable to Charlie Kirk's mission, his movement, his work in the condemnation of his violence and the violence against him, I should say, that just goes to show how the biggest names in Democratic politics are going out of their way to avoid escalating and contributing to the escalation. Again, Chuck Schumer, the Democratic Senate minority leader, along with Hakeem Jeffries, one of the highest ranking member of the Democratic Party in the federal government. Political violence has no place in America. The shooting is horrifying, and I'm praying for Charlie Kirk and his family. AOC, Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, right? The symbol of federal progressivism. Again, at the federal level, this is what she had to say. The scourge of gun violence and political violence must end. The shooting of Charlie Kirk is the latest incident of this chaos, and it must stop. We cannot go down this road. There's no place for it in America, and we wish for his recovery. And again, this, of course, before he died. Ilhan Omar, another symbol of, the far left commie Marxist at the federal level. This is what she said. Political violence is absolutely unacceptable and indefensible. Unconscionable acts of violence should have no place in our country. Let's pray for no more lives to be lost to gun violence. Again, responding with dignity and grace and compassion. And I'll close by saying this. Every living former president joined Trump in condemning Charlie Kirk's assassination. Former President Bill Clinton said, "I'm saddened and angered by Charlie Kirk's murder, and I hope we all go through some serious introspection and redouble our efforts to engage in debate passionately, yet peacefully. Hillary and I are keeping Erica, their 2 young children, and their family in our prayers." President Bush says, "Today a young man was murdered in cold blood while expressing his political views on college campus, where the open exchange of opposing ideas should be sacrosanct. Violence and vitriol must be purged from the public square. Members of the other political parties are not our enemies. They are our fellow citizens. May God bless Charlie Kirk and his family. May God guide America towards civility." Of course, he was the last civil. The Bush administration was terrible, but he was the last civil Republican president, to be sure. President Obama says, "We don't know yet what motivated this person who shot and killed Charlie Kirk, but this kind of despicable violence has no place in our democracy. Michelle and I will be praying for Charlie's family tonight, especially his wife Erica and their 2 young children." And finally, President Biden said, "There's no place in our country for this kind of violence. It must end now. Jill and I are praying for Charlie Kirk's family and loved ones." And Vice President Kamala Harris as well condemned the violence. Here's my point. I want to get this out of the way and try to put it together and bring the receipts. In mass political movements, there is no way to 100% police the responses of people. You will have crazy, unhinged lunatics say all sorts of vicious things. That is not necessarily a reflection of the movement itself. A better indication of what a movement believes as a general proposition are what its leaders say, what the leaders think, what the leaders show. And that's where you'll see a stark contrast, as you'll see in subsequent videos, between the 2 parties. The Democratic Party is not perfect. Liberals and progressives and leftists are not perfect. But there is a concerted effort with damn near unanimity to condemn political violence. And that has to be noted, because you're going to see a lot of things from the right, and I'll show you this, from Republican leaders suggesting the opposite, saying that Democratic leaders are indifferent, or they're celebrating this, or that it's a movement of evil and violence. And this just proves, it's one of the many pieces of evidence that it is not. So keep that in mind as you see and hear the reaction from deranged elements of Republican and right-wing leadership. In the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.